unearthed information, video messages and voice recordings from an investigation and from a plot to assassinate these two television presenters on the streets of London. They were faces of Iran International, a channel mainly aimed at Iranian people living abroad, a channel with a huge following, and because they were reporting on what's happening in Iran, they became targets of the regime. Now, we named two of the plotters, Mohammed Ansari and Mohammed Kanafani. They have both now been added to the UK sanctions list, and not just that, but the organisation that they were part of, Unit 840, which we understand is tasked with targeting foreign nationals abroad, has also been sanctioned in its entirety by the UK. One interesting point from this sanctions list is the prevalence of, drug dealers, alleged people traffickers. It's often, it seems to be organised criminals that the Iranian regime looks to carry out this work. And of course, this is about the threat from Iran, the perceived threat from Iran on a home soil. All of this at a time when the UK, the US and others are in direct, indirect conflict with Iran's proxies here in the Middle East.
Okay, Rohit, thank you very much. Okay, let's return now to that drone attack at a base in Jordan. And with the latest, here's our correspondent Robert Moore on the escalating conflict.
Last night, Joe Biden returned to Washington promising to avenge the weekend attacks on US troops. But still weighing the most important decision of his presidency, whether to launch a retaliatory strike directly against Iran. At the Pentagon today, the US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin was hosting NATO's Secretary General, making clear that America would take steps to re-establish deterrence in the region.
Let me start with my outrage and sorrow for the death of 3 brave U.S. troops in Jordan and for the other troops who were wounded. The President and I will not tolerate attack on U.S. forces, and we will take all necessary actions to defend the U.S. and our troops.
The weekend drone attack by an Iranian-backed proxy militia happened here, on a remote desert base used by the U.S. known as Tower 22, that lies at the strategically sensitive borders of Jordan, Syria and Iraq. It is only a few miles from a US base in Syria that a year ago was also attacked by Iranian proxies. Questions are already being asked about a failure of air defenses and intelligence. Now the issue is whether President Biden orders his forces gathered in the region to strike the militia groups again, or whether to send a much more powerful signal directly to Iran. His hardline critics in Congress are openly taunting Biden for what they call his weakness as commander-in-chief. Senator Lindsey Graham demanding, hit Iran now, hit them hard. And his Republican colleague, Senator John Cornyn, declaring, target Tehran. But the risk of that is that Iran's forces respond in kind, and the regional war that America has long sought to contain might then spiral out of all control. US allies, including Britain, are demanding that Iran steps back from the brink.
Yes, we are concerned and would urge Iran to continue to de-escalate tensions in the region. We absolutely condemn what has happened over the past couple of days.
Despite that support from allies, the politics of this decision in an election year for President Biden are especially fraught. His critics here are circling, and he must seek an almost impossible military option, one that Tehran cannot ignore, but that does not risk a major regional escalation. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Well, our senior international correspondent, John Irvine, is in Tel Aviv for us. John, what do you think this drone attack means for the situation in the Middle East currently?
Charlene, I think it's worrying that this creeping conflagration has involved yet another country, Jordan this time. But what happens next depends on American retaliation. There's a sort of grade of severity. They could strike at the lower level, they could strike against Iranian proxies in Iraq or Syria. Next up, they could hit Iranian targets in Iraq and Syria. The top grade retaliation would be to hit Iranian targets inside Iran itself. But Washington will be reluctant to do that because both they and Tehran have said they don't want this to escalate any further. Now, the one sure way to probably end this regional conflagration would be to bring about a ceasefire in Gaza itself. Now, towards that end, Charlene, there were important talks in Paris at the weekend and in Washington, D.C. today. The big sticking point seems to be the duration of another ceasefire. The terror group Hamas is fearful that once it releases all the remaining Israeli hostages, Israel will simply get back to war. They want a permanent ceasefire. Israel wants a temporary one. The compromise appears to be a 6-week truce during which something like 40 hostages would be freed. Now, the mediators are working harder than ever at this, not least the Americans, having just lost 3 of their own.
Okay, John, thanks very much. 2 teenagers stabbed to death in Bristol on Saturday night have been named.
And on a cheery note, there's been a couple of kids killed in Bristol. Anywho, man, look what's happening over that area of the world. It's just snowballing. We've got 3 options. Hit the proxies, hit Iran's proxies, hit Iran directly in Syria or Iraq, or hit Iran in Iran. And that guy's got a Northern Irish accent, so if anybody's down with the terrorists, he is. Get it. Got it. This is getting good. Cat cheese. No cats or cheese were used in this film, Clips. And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the notification bell as well. And $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you at hand.
What was the song?